The Cursed Herbs Call, the Spirit Beneath the Dark Well. Part 4, Knocking Beneath the Steel Hatch. That night, Edward Carter refused to turn his back toward the old skylight. The small red toy car still lay at his feet. One wheel was missing. It was covered with dirt and rainwater. He slowly bent down and picked it up, his hands trembling uncontrollably. It was Noah's toy. He had seen it with his own eyes lying beside the torn sleeping mat beneath the skylight on the night of the tragedy. But that morning, after the police had taken Sarah and Noah's bodies away, the toy had disappeared. So then, who had brought it back? Or what had? A freezing gust of wind swept through the hallway. Edward shivered. He hurried back inside and slammed the heavy wooden door shut. Bang! The sound echoed through the house. Then, thump, thump, footsteps, walking across the metal roof. Slow, heavy. As though someone were pacing back and forth overhead, Edward slowly looked up. His fingers tightened around the toy car. The footsteps stopped directly above the skylight. Then tap, a soft knock. Edward froze. Tap, tap. 2 more knocks followed. The sound wasn't coming from the roof. It seemed to come from beneath the skylight. A wave of icy fear crawled up his spine. He couldn't bring himself to look toward the backyard. The knocking continued. Slow, patient. As though someone below was tapping the wall of the well with a fingertip. Tap, tap, tap. Edward remained in the living room until sunrise. He never closed his eyes. The following morning, he visited his elderly neighbor, Mr. Harris, the oldest resident on Willow Lane. After quietly listening to the entire story, the old man remained silent for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Do you believe in spirits?" Edward didn't answer. Before all of this, he never had. Now he wasn't so sure. Mr. Harris lit a cigarette and inhaled deeply. People who die unjustly rarely find peace. You mean, I'm only repeating what the old folks used to say. He stared out the window. Places where terrible things happen collect darkness, especially places where children die. Edward swallowed hard. So what should I do? The old man looked toward the end of the lane. The best thing you can do is never leave that skylight open again. Seal it. Mr. Harris nodded. Seal it completely. Edward remained quiet. After a long pause, he finally agreed. That afternoon, construction workers arrived. Large steel plates were unloaded in front of the house. One of the workers looked down through the skylight. "Why do you suddenly want to cover this up?" Edward answered without hesitation. "I don't need it anymore." The worker shrugged. He didn't ask another question. As evening approached, the work began. The first steel plate was lowered into place. At that exact moment, a powerful gust of icy wind burst upward from the well below. It was unnaturally cold. One of the workers shivered. "Man, it's freezing down there." Another laughed. "Wells are always cold." But when they leaned over to look, the water below was perfectly still. Not even a ripple. The oldest worker frowned. "That's strange." Then giggled. A child's laughter drifted through the air. Soft, almost impossible to hear. Every worker immediately looked around. "Did you hear that?" It sounded like a kid. Silence settled over the courtyard. The laughter vanished. One worker scratched his head. Probably children playing somewhere in the neighborhood. No one replied. But after that, everyone worked much faster. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The final steel plate was welded into place. The very moment the last weld was finished, bang! A violent impact exploded from beneath the hatch. Everyone jumped. Bang! Bang! The sound came again, louder this time. as though someone had slammed both fists against the underside of the steel. The youngest worker turned pale. Is someone trapped down there? No one answered. Edward stood frozen. Bang, bang, bang. The pounding became even harder, more desperate. One of the workers dropped his hammer. My God! What is that? The pounding continued for nearly 10 seconds. Then it stopped. The courtyard fell silent. Only the evening wind whispered through the yard. The workers stared at one another. Every face had turned ghostly white. Edward. I think we're leaving. Without waiting for a reply, they hurriedly packed up their tools. Less than 10 minutes later, Edward was standing alone. He stared at the freshly welded steel hatch. His heart felt unbearably heavy. What was still down there? The first night after the skylight had been sealed, Edward went to bed unusually early. Close to midnight, he suddenly woke. Knock. His eyes opened. Knock. Knock. The sound came again. He slowly sat up. Cold sweat formed on his forehead. Knock. 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 This time the sound was unmistakable. It came from the back of the house, from beneath the steel hatch, as though someone was trying to knock their way out. Edward held his breath. Then, a child's voice whispered through the darkness. Sir. His entire body locked in place. Please, open the door. The voice was weak. It sounded as though the child had been crying. I'm so cold. Edward felt the blood drain from his face. He recognized that voice. It was Noah. Outside, the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. Please, let me in. Edward immediately pulled the blanket over his head. He pressed both hands tightly over his ears. He didn't dare listen. He didn't dare answer. The knocking continued for what felt like forever. Gradually, it grew softer, until finally, everything became silent again. The next morning, Edward opened his bedroom door. Then he stopped. Right outside his bedroom sat the little red toy car. Beside it were tiny wet footprints. They led silently down the hallway, straight toward the skylight that had already been sealed. Edward stood perfectly still. A freezing breeze drifted through the house. And for the very first time, he began to wonder if he should abandon the home he had lived in for decades.